Welcome to another one of our wonderful top speakers at the Global Virtual Expo. And we have with us Kate Macnamara, Counsellor, Transformative, Psychotherapist, and author of the trilogy Wholehearted Revolution. Hello, Kate.
Hello, Sigrid.
Really good to have you here. And today you are going to share with us about the power of transformative healing, which is embodied wholeness, real empowerment, true potential. Take it away, Kate.
Thank you so much, Sigrid, and welcome everybody. It's lovely to be back again today. You may have wondered at some point in your life, how do I create real change? How do I really embody my empowerment or be who I really am or identify and live your real potential? So there's lots of questions that can be in there for us. And we are all incredible, unique beings with many interrelated components and features and characteristics. Our bodies comprise of several systems, from our respiratory systems to our circulatory system. Our mind encompasses our intellect, enabling us to think and reason and imagine. And we also have personality traits, etc., beliefs, values, etc. So we're incredibly unique beings. And I often call this term, we are multifaceted. We have many facets to our humanity. And we also have a deeper essence, which really comes into this when it comes to identifying and living in alignment with our passionate purpose. But often we find ourselves, here we are in our lives, and life happens. Such as only yesterday after the conference, my computer completely shut down. And I was presenting again today. How do we meet ourselves in the everyday? How do we de-escalate our nervous systems? How do we process our fears? We need to know that at a everyday level, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But then how do we really create deep change within ourselves? And to remember, we're not trying to become something we're not. It's about becoming, embodying, being able to live in alignment with who we really are and offer that uniqueness in our own lives, in our relationships, our families, and within the world. So it's really important. And I really believe that everybody has the capacity to heal and be all that they are. So to begin with, there are those subjects that's important to know about ourselves. Okay. And unfortunately, things aren't necessarily always taught in school or when we go to universities, etc. But we do need to understand some parts of our humanity, how we function, so that we can actually sit comfortably in the driver's seat in an empowering way with ourselves. Okay. And we have a conscious mind, which is the tip of the iceberg, and the subconscious is like underneath the iceberg. There's a lot deeper there. So just to begin with, I'm just going to invite you just to take a slow, deep breath within your body and just let yourself settle into your chair and just become aware of yourself breathing, sitting where you are, feeling the felt sense inside your body, the inner sensations. If you're not comfortable, give a little wriggle around, let yourself become comfortable. You have a body, this mind, and you. The motherboard, we might call that, after my experience with the computer, which melted down. So just take an extra or one or two deep, slow breaths. And then we'll just share a little bit about these incredible beings in which we inhabit. So we have a body, we have a mind, and in our body, there's a deep need for safety for us, to be able to relax, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to be open and receive. And that's the space where our creativity comes from. Okay. We need to be able to feel safe within ourselves, but we are wired with a security system that's there to protect and defend to ensure our survival. And this is the nervous system, that if there's a threat, real or perceived, we adrenalize and mobilize into fight or flight. So if we're yelling or cranky, we're in fight. If we walk out and slam the door behind us, we're in flight. But that can escalate into freeze, right? But we've still got fight and flight running strong in the system while we're in freeze. We've got like the foot on the accelerator and the foot on the brake at the same time. And then that can escalate even further. So immobilization and freeze, we go into fold, the collapse. You may have seen on YouTube clips of the poor old goats. They don't even do the fight and flight. They just seem to go boing. And I don't know whether to laugh or cry for them because it looks funny, but they go straight to fold. They go straight to fold. So we have that system, which is just a brilliant system in the short term. However, often, if we've been through trauma, our system doesn't have a linear memory. It remembers. And that's why we trigger. If you grew up in a family where there was loud voices or threats, later on in life, a partner can raise their voice and suddenly we've got a nervous system response, because the nervous system takes note up here in the amygdala that that's a potential threat. Because our nervous system scans all the time. Are we safe? Is there safety, danger, life threat? Danger's fight and flight. Immobilization, that's life threat. Okay, so we do that all the time, and it's brilliant in the short term. But yes, if there's been trauma or wounds, we've experienced something, our nervous system can be vulnerable to stuck on. In other words, the accelerator's down. We're not idling at 1500 revs, we're idling at 3000. So it doesn't take much for us to go further. Okay. People who have ADHD, ASD, they're on the spectrum, chronic fatigue, adrenal burnout, their nervous systems have been stuck on. They're burning a lot of adrenaline, the accelerator's been down, or sometimes people just like their mind's racing, they're restless, they can't stop. The accelerator's been stuck on. Right? It can become stuck off. It can be easily triggered, these sorts of things. So it is really, really important, and I always feel very passionate to understand our nervous system and to befriend it, that it becomes our friend. It's working to support us, but sometimes it's attempting to support us as it did long ago, and it doesn't need to any longer. Okay, so that's really important. And I'd invite you just to take a really long, slow out breath. Preferably through the nose, but if you can't do it through the nose, just do it any long out breath. And as you breathe out, let your belly button go to the spine. As you breathe in, let the belly fill. That's one of the most quickest ways, if you practice that, to put the brake on. It activates what's called the ventral brake in the parasympathetic nervous system to slow the system so that you can re-engage with the outer cortex of the brain. And where all our logical thinking is, our ability to communicate effectively is, etc. It's all here in the outer cortex. But when we go into fight and flight, and if you're stressed or feeling anxious, you've activated fight and flight, we need to bring ourselves out. So that's one really important topic. And I'd invite you to research that a little bit for yourselves. Within your relationships, it might be a partner, a child, or if you're working professionally, your client, and you notice that something's gone on from them, they're not feeling safe. Okay. So we can't listen or communicate when we aren't. And of course, then one of the other really important topics is to understand the role of the mind. So the tip of the iceberg, our thoughts and beliefs play a role in how we feel and behave. And they go really deeply, but I'm going to come back to that in a moment. If you're feeling angry or upset or tired or cranky or triggered, what to do with that? And over the years, I've created what I call the 3-tiered wholehearted empowerment process, because we need a roadmap. We need a roadmap of how to meet ourselves in the here and now. And where else would we meet ourselves but in the here and now? Sometimes we're in the past, spreading over the past, or we're fearing the future. But the only real time we have is in the moment. So if we can meet ourselves in the here and now, so in the three-tiered wholehearted empowerment process, the first tier is to do that. So the second tier is where we're going to really go today. But that first tier, the first level, is how to meet ourselves in the everyday, how to de-escalate the nervous system if need be, and how to process reactions, strong emotions, fears. We need to have some tools in the tray to do it. We've got lots of ordinary everyday ones, sharing, exercise, even tears, lots of unhealthy ones, numbing out through alcohol, drugs, yelling, there's lots and lots of, and we've all tried some of them to some degree. I don't think there's anyone that hasn't yelled at somebody, or we've all done it. Things come out if we're really honest. So, how to do that. So that's the first step, de-escalating the nervous system, processing deeply what's there in the everyday, and how to work with your mind. Right, that's so, so important. And what I want to add there again today is that principle. It's more a philosophy, really, in a spiritual philosophy. But underneath every thought and belief we ever have, there's only two motivating forces. One of them is fear. So all the should, must, got to, have to's, oughtas, striving, all of those are fear. And fear-based things, or things that are not in alignment with you, will be experienced in the body as tension, shortness of breath, uptightness, discomfort, right? While things that are healthy thinking, so the other motivating force is love, but it's constructive, healthy, useful, believable thinking and beliefs. And they will be experienced in the body, as will things that are in alignment with you and your values, as comfortable, at ease, deep belly breath. So right now, maybe just take a slow, deep belly breath. Breathing just in and out through your mouth, equal, even paced. Out breath, breathing right out to where you're sitting. In breath, letting the belly fill. So that's the everyday. And we all need to be able to have to do that. And there's lots of tools and techniques in the psychotherapeutic toolbox as to how to process what we're feeling. But then the second tier becomes, what about the causative level? So what causes? So this is where real change, real healing happens, is in the causative level. You may have done self-work with yourself, or done lots of cognitive behavioral work with the mind, but then sometimes something happens and bang, we're right back. Some old patterns, some old fear, it comes back and we respond. Something triggers us and we go, oh, not that again. I thought it had gone away. I thought I got rid of that, but it can come back. So, and in a lot of in the mental health world, they're not really addressed. There is mainly a focus on symptoms. And we need to be able to focus on symptoms at time. If somebody's not stable within themselves, they're having thoughts of harming themselves, they do need support in the everyday to be able to alleviate that, because again, we're whole beings. We have a body and a mind and a soul. So, or true self, whatever you're comfortable with, that inner essence. So we do need to consider ourselves holistically. And in that first level, that includes medically. I'm very holistic in my approach, but it doesn't exclude the medical part of it. Sometimes people say to me, Kate, I've been struggling with depression. The GP's diagnosed me, but I don't want to use medication. That's okay. You can try, if they're providing they're safe within themselves, you can try to see how the strategies go. But sometimes people can effectively work with them. Other times, if the chemistry of the brain is not functioning in a way that it normally would do, it's not realistic to expect ourselves to do that. It's like saying to a diabetic not to use their insulin and expect their body to be able to do without it. Sometimes we do need support to help our bodies do what they would normally do, even from the psychotherapeutic process. However, it's also important to heal what causes all of that. So in neuroscience, we know factually that you cannot separate the mind from the body, even though that's not accepted into the medical world yet. So that's really interesting. Bruce Lipton, if you've heard of him, back in 2005, really rocked the scientific world when he discovered that what happens at a cellular level is not caused by the nucleus of the cell. It's the cell has little antennae around it, and it picks up what's held in the field of consciousness. So there's a connection, and since his work, there's been a plethora of work to substantiate what he discovered. So we know that the body-mind's connected. So we need to look after ourselves physically as well in that everyday. Well, but what causes, right? So level 2 becomes what's causing what I'm experiencing that I'm sticking band-aids on every day in my everyday life. And this is the part that I feel really passionate about, because this is where we really create change. And there's two main areas of this. One is to heal in the nervous system, to heal the impact of the trauma that's held within the consciousness and the nervous system. That's what PTSD actually is. It's the residue of the trauma that's held there. And what happens in the brain, memory is a really complex thing, but at night time when people have nightmares, etc., with PTSD, the brain's trying to do its storeman's job, the filing and sorting of things, but it can't. It's blocked because it hasn't been able to be processed. So the nervous system's still holding it as well. So being able to heal in the nervous system, not only deactivate it, but heal release the residue of what's held there. And that's not cognitive work. There's some of it comes into it, but it's actually body work. And we do that through the breath, through movement, through sound. Sound is very important. And sometimes sound from the bottom of our belly. We connect with our voice. And if we've experienced the freeze response, that's really, really important, because the voice shuts down when the freeze response happens. Okay? So again, just take a slow, deep breath and just tune into it. I want you to be just gentle with yourself at the moment, because I'm talking about trauma. And you may very well have experienced trauma. So just be gentle with yourself. Hold this lightly, if you can, while I'm talking about this. And just feel that a sense of compassion for yourself at the moment. So a sense of compassion brings safety within our immediate field of consciousness, whereas judgment or criticism or expectation brings unsafety. Okay, so just hold that lightly and gently for yourself, that what we're talking about, if it touches a part of you or your nervous system pricks its ears up, just use your nose breath, just a few nose breaths right out. Let yourself come back to that centering, okay? And just be with yourself for just a moment. We do have an incredible capacity to heal very deeply. But this is why the information about the nervous system and how it works is so important. And even that can bring safety. I've often had a client who, for example, has been experiencing anxiety attacks, but just knowing about the nervous system and knowing at that moment, it's like, okay, they know what's going on. The nervous system's rung the alarm bells. It's trying to function. So even knowing that's important. So just hold that lightly, because there's many types of trauma, and the traumas can compound as well, as do griefs, and things build upon. And sometimes with grief, a present day grief will trigger whatever unresolved griefs are there. So the whole kit and caboodle can come up. So that's why it's important to have that first level, so you feel really safe and confident and competent that no matter what occurs, you can meet yourself there and process it through. So healing, very somatic. Peter Levine was one of the fathers of what's called somatic work, working with the felt sense inside the body. If you tune in right now and take a slow, deep breath, you might notice if there's tension anywhere. You know, our body tells us immediately where to go. Okay. But yeah, so we know that we work in the body, movement, sound, and there's other techniques as well that come into that, which I won't go into today, but they're there. And if ever you're seeing somebody for trauma work, ensure that they are fully trauma informed and fully trained. Not everybody is, even at a therapeutic level. They're not. So it's really important that they are trained in the latest neuroscience of trauma. The work of Stephen Porges has been incredibly important with that, with understanding the vagus nerve, because we've learned that activating the vagus nerve is how we put the brake on, the vagal brake on. And that's so important even for children. Children inversion is a way that they do that. We can use the nose breath. Children often when they play, they bend right over. It's like they can touch their feet really with their head. You know, there's techniques that occupational therapists are teaching children of how to regulate the nervous system. Okay, so regulation's really important. And it is for people with mood disorders, etc., how to regulate ourselves. So that's really important. So at that causative level, it is the healing of trauma, wounds, complex griefs, and also the deep programming in the mind. Okay, so in our talk yesterday, I mentioned this, but the role of schemas, and Jeffrey Young's work's really important with this, that we really, as we're growing up, we're forming our databases about ourselves and the world through what's role modeled to us through what we experience. And I always describe it, it's like the back-end programming of the computer, which I don't see doing telehealth sessions or talks like this or doing my emails, but something's running the show. And we do. It's like children do their mathematics. This experience equals, this is what's true about me. And that's the part where it really sets in deeply. It becomes a part of self-identification. Okay. And some of the examples of that are abandonment. People believe that who I am is somebody who others will leave, or I won't have support when I need it. It won't be there. Fear of failure is actually a schema, right? I am somebody who fails. A very simple way of putting it. There's lots of mistrust as a schema. Emotional inhibition is a strong schema, particularly for women, right? I am somebody who suppresses my emotions and puts others' feelings first, right? So these are the self-identifications, but they are not the truth of who you are. We often believe we're the rotten apple at the bottom of the barrel. And then there's three ways that to cope and survive. One is we're surrendered to the schema, or we avoid, so surrender's freeze, or we avoid the schema being activated, which is flight in the nervous system, or we go into fight, which is overcompensation. So if somebody, for example, has a fear of failure, if they go into overcompensation, they're the workaholics of the world. Often there's a fear of failure there. They're making sure they get it right, they do it right. You know, no one sees they're the rotten apple there. They're going to work on it, right? If there's avoidance, often there's procrastination. They're trying to make sure they're prepared and can get it right, right, before they do it to make sure they don't fail. So if you have somebody or a partner in your life that procrastinates, it's like that's often the deeper fear that's been activated. Or if there's for a fear of failure, if it's surrender, it's like, why bother? Why bother? Stuff up anyway. So these are the ways, our coping survival mechanisms, and I'm putting the psychological there together with the nervous system of how that works. But we often live on in this web of coping survival mechanisms without knowing what's actually happening, why we're triggering, right? So you might even just tune in for yourself. Is there a vulnerability to think I'm not enough, or I'm unworthy, or I could fail, or support never shows up when I need it? any of those sorts of ones. In Jeffrey Young's work, he lists 18 of them. And it's really important because we need to release those, identify them and release them, gently challenge them within ourselves. And it's difficult for people to do often. And I think it's important. This takes courage, this work. I always feel so privileged to work with people in the deep transformative work because it takes courage to look under the hood. It's like, what's actually going on here? Because often we're very committed subconsciously to coping and surviving. We're doing the best we can. It's very vulnerable to begin to look within ourselves to really heal. Right? We look outside to the world for some sort of affirmation to disprove our deepest fears or relationships. Unknowingly, we draw to ourselves often somebody who will trigger our deepest fears. And of course, they're in trouble the moment they don't appease them. That can often happen in our relationships. And again, we don't know that's happening, but often when I work with couples, that's there, and it's like, well, relationship is really a powerful place where what's under the hood that we haven't recognized can be triggered. So there are ways, but it needs to be a very holistic way when we're working at a causative level. We need to be aware of that we are multifaceted, that there's many aspects, components of who we are as a whole being. And sometimes we go to a therapist or we learn a certain thing, and that's important for that area, but not to lose scope of what else is there, because we can't leave part of ourselves behind. And that was something I myself needed to learn many years ago after a long journey of, in the 1990s, I can recall really yearning to what helps us really heal. I was still nursing at the time. I'd begun learning counselling and psychology, but it's like the psychoanalyst stuff, it's like, but what helps us heal? And that was sort of a journey that took me around the world in the end. But later on in 2012, when I'd been counselling for a long time, I'd done a lot of self-work, been on a spiritual journey, but my nervous system still used to play up on me. And I used to think I was angry with it and critical with it that it did when it shut me down and I couldn't speak. So I needed to go back and specifically work with my nervous system because it still held the memory, even though a lot of psychological wounding had been healed. The nervous system still held the memory that it needed to shut me down if it detected a threat. Right? So sometimes we do need to go back to different aspects of ourselves and to be able to bring that forward. Okay, so, but keeping in mind our wholeness, our emotional health, our mental health, our physical health, and being able to heal at the causative level, what actually is causing so much of what we experience in our everyday lives. So we liken that to peeling back the layers of the onion sometimes, because the third tier in the wholehearted empowerment process is about, well, if I'm not all these misidentifications, who am I? Who, mother, daughter, worker, all these roles, but the roles aren't our identity, but we often identify with them. And I'm not saying, well, they can be a part of it, I guess, but they're not the real identity of who we are. So, well, how do I discover who I really am? If you for a moment take a deep, slow breath and think of somebody you really love or something you really love doing, just tune in to what that feels like in your body. And your breath. Now, did you need to go to your mind to figure out the answer? Or do you just know it? You just know it. I can see a few of you nodding. It's like, well, who is the I that knows the truth? Who am I that knows what's truly true within me? That's you. Okay? And it's not up here in the mind. It's like it's down here, right? And sometimes right down into the womb. We can feel, discern, to know what's true. If we're caught, we're activated in the nervous system, we're in fear or reaction, we disconnect from that. And that's what's happened for millennia. One of the greatest imbalances is that the mind and the heart are disconnected. We live on in the imbalance, which we talked about yesterday, and the dynamics and the patterns that trap us. So that's another level of working with healing the causes, is to release ourselves from the patterns and the dynamics that actually entrap us. And that's really, it can be done. It all sort of comes together in a very holistic way of doing that. And as we do, yeah, we begin to connect more with who am I really? Who am I really? And that can, who you are really will blow your mind as you connect with her, and sometimes him, how we identify, because we are the most incredible beings. And over the years, this depth of who we are, even from traditional old psychology, has been called many things through the years. It's been called authentic self, transcendental self, real self, true self, soul. Take your pick, depending on what your beliefs are. It's up to you. But there is a true self within the self, and that's recognized generally. And I often say it's the self that recognizes when something's true, and it ties in with our nervous system, our intuition. If something doesn't feel okay, it's our nervous system warning us, but sometimes we get a deeper feeling. We know it. And as incredible, so we're multifaceted in our humanness, we're also multidimensional. So that becomes really interesting because we all have this is a third dimensional world we live in, but we have many abilities and capacities and gifts far beyond what we often experience in our everyday lives. And when I was a little girl, it took me a long time to realize that not everybody saw some things, which was really interesting. But we all do. And I believe that they're for all of us. It doesn't make someone special if they are aware of those things or not. Those gifts and abilities are all there. But our passionate purpose lies within that realm of connection to who we really are. Okay. It will link back up into our minds, and often we need to learn skills and craft the way we speak and all these different things. But when it comes from the depth of who we are, that's really, really important. That becomes our embodied wholeness. We embody, because our wholeness is right with us every day. You can't lose who you are, but we certainly can lose conscious awareness and connection through our fears and our wounds. So sometimes I've had, over the years, more than one client burst in the door. How do I discover who I really am? I've tried this, this, and this, and I've been to retreats and I've done this. And it's like, peel back the layers of all you're not. What are you left with? You. So you can't lose you. And I think that's beautiful to know, because sometimes it feels like we've stuffed up. Even in our human journey, we've got it wrong. We live on in what's called a world of separation. Like a tree growing outside, I don't think the tree sees itself separate from Mother Earth, but because we're individuated, we see ourselves as separate, and we're wired in a body to protect and defend. And yet connectedness, a sense of belonging within ourselves, is so important. Okay. So there's a whole lot that comes to this, and it's a little difficult to put it into a short talk in a way. I've certainly covered it in the trilogy Wholehearted Revolution that was published last year. The trilogy, it's a combined trilogy because you can't separate them up. And it's the journey, and my own life's an example in there of going back, but it's about self-discovery. It's about really what helps us heal. And then as we heal, what opens up in life. So there's so much to there, and you can find that on the website, on my Jesmery Counselling website, or wholeheartedrevolution.com.au. And there's information about that. And Later this year, I'm working on the companion book for it, which is much shorter. It's like the backstory, but the companion book. And the other day, I'd woken up in a meditation, and that was spontaneous meditation, and I received the name of that book will be called, the companion book will be Leap into Liberation. So this wholehearted revolution. And the revolution is the healing within ourselves, right? Something needs to happen. Somebody said to me, but Kate, isn't this about our evolution? Into a different consciousness, we evolve. Like, yeah, but something needs to happen for that to happen. So I call that our revolution. It's the healing process within ourselves into our embodied wholeness, into our real empowerment, into our where we really feel our true potential. And that then becomes a shift within ourselves and within our collective consciousness. And in fact, I feel there's so much going on in our world today, but this is where every one of us can make an incredible contribution. Because every time somebody responds out of truth within themselves instead of fear, every time somebody, creates any type of healing or form of healing, it creates a ripple effect. That's really incredible. And that's needed. And the more that we heal and we're embodying who we are and we are being of service or really offering our gifts to the world, we are creating a revolution, not just within ourselves, but we're creating a revolution of consciousness upon the planet, which is really needed. There's a huge, that's what wholehearted revolution, the healing within ourselves, that's where we begin, and the ripple effect out through the collective consciousness and the shifting of our consciousness upon the planet. I remember hearing from Carolyn Mace. I'd listened to a talk, some of you might know her, a lot of her beautiful work. And she said, when the atomic bomb was first created, there was a realization that our only way for real healing and change was within ourselves, because we have the power to destroy ourselves and the earth. So I'm saying that to encourage you and to thank you for your courage to be willing to live, learn, grow, offering what you're offering to the world, creating change. It makes a difference and it's needed. So just again, just a long, slow, deep breath within yourself. You have the power to heal. Transform your human consciousness into embodied wholeness right here in this world. You are needed in this world. And just allow that just to settle into your bones. And with that, it feels like that's complete for today. So thank you, Secret, so much, and everyone for having me here. And I'll hand it back over to you, Secret.
Thank you very much, Kate. That is just on a really deep level for all of us to take on what you have shared here. And it definitely requires us to listen to it again. Kate, do you have your book at hand there just to hold it up like you did last time? It is a trilogy, so there is a lot in that book, and it has got all the details of what Kate has been sharing with us. Thanks, Kate. So that is available. Thank you very much for that talk today. You've given us another extension of the level we're on right now. Thanks, Kate.
You're very welcome.